Our next guest is heir to the musical dynasty of the legendary Thelonious Monk. And as a jazz drummer, composer, band leader, and vocalist, he's doing more than carrying on his father's legacy. He's building his own.
That's right. Here to talk about the International Jazz Day, his work as the Thelonious Monk Institute, and his one-of-a-kind career is Thelonious Monk Jr. Welcome to Arise 360.
How you guys doing?
We have to ask about that name, Thelonious.
Thelonious.
You know,
it's legendary.
It is legendary.
Does it have a historical significance as well?
Well, it has a historical significance relative to the family, in that people tend to think that it is somewhat Romanesque, somewhat Latin-ish, or Greek-like, but as a matter of fact, my great-great-grandparents made it up.
Are you kidding?
It was a sound that they just made up, and you know, if you actually go into African-American history, you'll notice that after the Civil War, many African-Americans changed their names from their slave-given names, and many of them took on names as bizarre as Major and Colonel, you know, and so Thelonious was a sound that they made up along with my great-great-grandfather had a brother named Squire Leanne. I mean, that was his name, Squire Leanne Monk.
Squire Leanne.
Yeah, you know.
And you're Thelonious the Third.
I'm Thelonious the Third. A lot of people call me Junior. But it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized that my father was actually the junior, but he didn't want to be called junior. So these days,
so he gave it to you.
So he gave it to me. But these days, I refer to myself as Thelonious Monk III because I have a son that's 26 years old, and he's actually the fourth, and I'm looking for him, perhaps one day, to have a son who'll be the fifth.
Wow.
Do you think it's important for the name to carry on for generations to come?
Well, you know, from my perspective, as an African American, there are very few names that the greater society respects and responds to, and Thelonious Monk is one of those names. So I feel there's an intrinsic value to it for me and my heirs.
I like it.
Keep it.
Keep it. Keep it going. Okay, now let's talk about Jazz Day.
Sure.
Why do you think it's important for jazz to have its own holiday?
Oh, well, there's no doubt about it. First of all, I would say with great confidence that jazz is, in fact, the universal musical language of the planet Earth. And I say that because jazz is the only musical genre that is played in virtually every country, every civilized country that we have. International Jazz Day was formulated, was an idea that came out of the chairman. I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. The chairman of the board is Herbie Hancock, and Herbie also was appointed by President Obama as the first UN Goodwill Ambassador in about 35 years. And so it was his idea. You know, everyone has known that jazz is international, but the international jazz community has never had a reason to actually coalesce under one banner for one cause. And the cause for International Jazz Day is education. That's something that everyone understands. That's something that's important to people in every country in the world, and jazz musicians in every country in the world. So International Jazz Day affords us an opportunity to bring together jazz musicians from all over the world. We have 196 countries involved.
196.
196. This year we're celebrating in the city of Osaka, which is
Osaka, Japan.
Osaka, Japan, the cultural center of Japan. And during the course of the 2.5–3 days, we will have master classes, we will have symposiums, we will have panels, we will have smaller performances at all kinds of bistros and restaurants, and really engage the entire city in this thing called jazz. And if you go back to Louis Armstrong and James Reese Europe, right, in the First World War, jazz brought the message of freedom to the entire world. If you look at repressive regimes such as the former Soviet Union, former apartheid South Africa, jazz was banned. Why was jazz banned?
Why?
Jazz was banned because jazz is the musical manifestation of the American ideal. It was created by ex-slaves and the children of ex-slaves, and as we know, people who suffer from oppression often express their desires in their art. You even see that in victims of Auschwitz, in the paintings that they drew and the writings that they made, talking about their aspirations. And so when you look at jazz, what is jazz really about? It's not a technique, it's really a philosophy. The philosophy says that everybody is included because they were not included. The philosophy says everybody's got something to say, you know? And we were not allowed to say. Jazz is about tolerance. Jazz is about inclusion. Jazz is about being part of the gang.
Yeah.
But the gang has a responsibility to the individual, and the individual a responsibility to the gang. So these are all fundamental American ideals that really transcend America. They're really human ideals.
They're universal.
They're universal. And this music, if you go to any country in the world, there will be a jazz community. And that jazz community will, in fact, reflect the cultural imperatives, the religious considerations, all those things that make up that culture, and is expressed by those artisans by telling their story, because jazz is musical storytelling. So this is what International Jazz Day is about. Louis Armstrong and James Reese Europe made sure that the people around the world understood it, and it has been the greatest cultural tool that America has ever had, and we're looking to continue.
One of our leading exports.
Yes, yes, including our ex-president, Bill Clinton. I mean, that was an important part of his profile.
Wow. Now, with jazz being so popular, was it difficult for you to bring all these 196 countries together to create this festival? And how did you, and who are some of your artists?
Well, some of the artists are, let's see, well, of course, I'm there. Herbie Hancock, we have Esperanza Spalding, a young, fabulous young lady. We have Dionne Warwick, who's going to be with her. You know, Dionne toured with my father and Hugh Mescala back in the 70s. People don't know that kind of thing. We have people like Chiro Masahino, a fantastic Japanese trumpet player. We have artists from India. We have, let's see, Dee Dee Bridgewater is singing. Roy Hargrove is playing. Marcus Miller is playing. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And unfortunately, I will be quite honest and say that there are a number of important international stars whose names are so complicated I can't pronounce them, so I'm not going to mispronounce them here.
Well, we like your name, and we know that it came from your father's father.
Yes.
But what was it like growing up with a jazz legend as a father?
Oh, a piece of cake. For
piece of cake?
For me, it was a piece of cake. Are you joking? Come on. I'm in the house, right? Who's knocking at the door? Well, Miles Davis is knocking at the door. John Coltrane is knocking at the door. Art Blakey and Max Roach are knocking at the door. Dizzy Gillespie's coming in. I'm a photography maniac because when I was 12 years old, Dizzy Gillespie came and just put a Nikon F camera around my neck and said, hey, said to my father, hey, Mom, you think the kid likes cameras? And put a $1,000 camera around my head, my neck. So Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, anybody that was anybody, because Thelonious in many ways, I kind of call him the root source preacher man for all of his generation. And he was sort of a gathering point for the light. That's why the Monk Institute, I think, has been so successful, because the Monk Institute is not about Thelonious Monk. It's about the music. But Thelonious represents, in many ways, the quintessential prototype for what a jazz. Every jazz musician wants to be unique. Every jazz musician wants to write a song that everybody wants to play, like Around Midnight. Every jazz musician wants to play something on their instrument that is so different that it changes the way everyone else plays. And Thelonious was like that. He was a triple threat. And so, but he was a good dad. See, and this is what people don't understand about this odd, quirky guy, Thelonious Monk. Taught me how to spin a top. Taught me how to talk to girls. I remember him pre-pamper days, slushing diapers, my sister's diapers, doing the Mr. Mom thing.
Wait, Thelonious Monk
Mr. Mom,
diapers?
Mr. Mom all the way. I was home, he was home. I watched him brutally kill a mouse one day, and then he made me look at it and say, you see, we don't need these in our house. It's done, right? And he used to wake up every morning, and it was totally disgusting. He would take a glass of milk and crack 2 raw eggs in it and drink that down. And every once in a while, he would say, hey, you want one? And I'd look at him and say, no,
pass
Daddy.
on that, Dad.
You know, but
what's the most important lesson that you learned about life and music from your father?
The most important lesson I learned musically from my father was that you have to listen to everybody. You must listen to everybody. And I don't mean everybody you like. He really meant everybody. I went through a period I'm 64 years old now.
Ooh, you look good.
So in the mid-'60s, I was a teenager. You know, I had my afro, my fist was raised, I was angry, and I wanted to justify certain feelings that I was building up inside because they made me feel better. And I'll never forget, I went to my dad and I said, it was a loaded question from my perspective. I said, Daddy, can Bing Crosby sing? Because, I mean, come on, White Christmas is the corniest guy there ever was, right? So I said, Daddy, can Bing Crosby sing? And he looked at me almost angry, clearly like I was a fool. And he said to me the same thing that he would say about a John Coltrane, about a Duke Ellington, about a Miles Davis or an Eric Dolphy or a Charlie Parker. You know what he said?
What did he say?
He said, man, are you joking? Bing Crosby got a sound. And I understood right then and there that what we did had to do with 12 notes. The same 12 notes that every composition that every composition that the audience has ever heard has been from the same 12 notes. We are not very, very different. And good and great are good and great regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of the chronology of your age, regardless of your religious background, regardless of your geographical location. That's what I learned from Thelonious, and I try to teach that to young people all the time, that you've got to listen, you've got to interact, you've got to know. Fear of the unknown is the greatest bane to humanity. It's why we have wars, it's why we have all this acrimony. And jazz says, everybody's in.
You know, Thelonious, people have often compared hip-hop to jazz. They call hip-hop the modern-day jazz. What do you think about that assessment?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what I think about that. I was very fortunate when I was very young, and one of the greatest drummers that ever lived, a gentleman by the name of Max Roach, gave me my lessons, okay?
Really?
And in about 1989, Max Roach helped found the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, and we were doing a program, and at the time, we hadn't quite moved into calling it full-blown hip-hop, but we were calling it things like house music and that kind of thing. And Max turned to me and he said to me, he said, my nickname is Toot, from my father's song, Little Rudy Tootie. And he turned to me and he said, Toot, do not sleep on these kids. This is us. This is us. We had no instruments. We had no music schools. We had nothing to work with. And we invented this music. And we took the music out of the schools, and we took the music from these children, and we molested, we violated the radio, so they have nothing. And they brilliantly, like every previous generation, made something wonderful out of nothing. Created an industry. You have entrepreneurs now that are close to billionaires as a result of this. And the only negative thing that I have to say about hip-hop is that I, as a baby boomer, am ashamed that we slept on our kids.
Wow. Well, now they can listen to your music and hear some great things and follow after your footsteps.
Well,
real quick, you have two albums coming up.
I got two albums
30 seconds, tell us about them.
I have one that I just completed in Belgium, which is coming out in June, which is called Monk Meets Verbeest, with a Belgian accordionist.
I love it.
It will change the way you think about the accordion.
And the other one?
And the other one is going to be, I'm going to do that at Jenny's on the 7th. It's going to be a live recording at Jenny's in Harlem. And I'm going to have a couple of guests, and it'll be the first part of a
We'll definitely be looking out for them. We have to go. I'm sorry, but
that's okay.
We'll be catching more of you. We'll come back, right?
Thelonious Monk Jr.,
thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for watching Arise Entertainment 360. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.